tonight's meditation is coming out of. I've been reading a new book by John Eldredge. It's called Resilient. It's really I'll put the name and the author's name and the book title and all that in the chat in a few moments. But I'm only partway into the book, and something that he wrote got me thinking about the storms of life. Got me thinking about the difficult times in life, the chaotic times in life, and how we respond to those. And in one section of his writing, he talks about all of the difficult times, all of the difficult experiences that you and I may experience. He talks about Jesus' life and all the difficulties that were going on in Jesus' day and in Jesus' age. And he talks about how when Jesus was alive, the Roman Empire was just this epitome of strength, and it was just so large and it was so overpowering. And if you thought much about it in Jesus' day, you would say that the Roman Empire was going to last forever, and that Jesus, the message of Jesus, the message of Christ, was something that was going to fade away rather quickly, especially after Jesus was crucified. And if you took a snapshot at that moment in time, you would have said, well, the Jewish religious leaders, the Roman Empire, they won, and Jesus lost, and so the world will continue on. But in fact, that's not what happened. We don't even think much about the Roman Empire. It doesn't impact your life very much, doesn't impact my life. It's really it's a history lesson for us today, right? But the reality of walking with Jesus, the reality of being in relationship with God through faith in Christ, is something that is alive and well in our lives and in our world today. It has been for the past 2,000 years. And so if you spoke to people in Jesus' day, if you spoke to the 12 disciples, and you asked them, how's life going? How is your world? What are you experiencing right now? They would have talked about all kinds of chaos. They would have talked about all kinds of upheaval. They would have talked about their world being turned upside down, and basically their world coming to an end because Christ was crucified. But in reality, what was happening is that something new was being birthed, right? That the Spirit of God was alive and well and at work in the world. And it got me thinking about how you and I, how we respond to the chaos in the world around us. And it got me thinking through the Gospels, got me thinking about the stories of Jesus and how Jesus responded to chaos. And one of the classic stories that is found in the Gospels, is where Jesus calms the storm. And it's in Matthew chapter 8 is one of the places that we find it. And Jesus and the disciples are out in a boat, and they're on the Sea of Galilee, and all of a sudden this big storm comes up. The scriptures say suddenly a ferocious storm came upon the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But in that moment, all of the disciples are panicking. All of the disciples are unsure of what is going to happen. But if you remember the story, what Jesus is doing is it's almost comical, right? Because Jesus is in the back of the boat, and Jesus is asleep. Jesus is calm. Jesus is, he's resting, he's napping. And there's all this chaos that's going on in the world around him, in the lives of other people. And yet in his heart, in his mind, he is calm enough that he is able to sleep. Until finally one of the disciples wakes him up and says, "Don't you care about what's going on? Don't you see that we're about to drown? Don't you see that this chaos is about to overtake us and to consume us?" And Jesus' response to the disciples is, "Oh, you of little faith." And then he stands up and he rebukes the wind, he rebukes the waves, everything calms down, and the disciples are left to just stand and look in awe upon Jesus, that the power that he has. And that got me thinking about the way that I respond to chaos and disruption in my world. And it's, I'm almost, I don't know, I don't want to say embarrassed or ashamed, but I respond like the disciples. When the storms start to build around me, all of a sudden I feel like I have to do something to fix it. I have to do something to correct it. And I start running around and I start moving from one side of the boat to the other side of the boat. I start overthinking. Well, this is what could happen. This is what might happen. I wonder, I wonder what's going to happen in that next conversation that I have. And I start to think through all of the different ways that the chaos, that the disruption could how it could impact my life. And what that does is it serves to build anxiety inside of me. It serves to build up stress inside of me. And it moves me further and further away from the idea of peace and the idea of calm, that Jesus talks about, and so I guess the challenge, I think, for us is to live and to move more like Jesus, and to be able to sit there and to rest in the midst of the chaos, and to rest in the midst of the storm, knowing that God is going to guide us and direct us, that God is going to protect us, that God is going to make a way in the midst of the storm, even when we can see no way through the storm. I mean, and it's easier for us to see when life is calm and when we look backwards and we see a storm in our life from looking back at the storm. And we start to think about, well, when this happened, I was all bent out of shape. I was all anxious. I was all nervous. I didn't know what to do. I had all these feelings. But in the end, God did something. The situation worked itself out, and everything is okay. And God watched over me. Even if it was a difficult situation, even if what we went through was hard and uncomfortable, God was with us in the midst of it. And it changes the way that we move through the world. And it's not that I'm suggesting that you and I should be like the ostrich, right? Sticks its head in the sand and doesn't pay attention to what's going on in the world around us. Like, I think we need to be aware of what's going on in the world around us. We need to be aware of the storms that are taking place in our lives around us all the time. The issue is, I think, and the question is, I believe, how we respond to those storms. Do we allow those storms to work us up emotionally? Or do we trust in the peace that passes all understanding that Jesus provides us? And we trust that God is faithful and will provide for us in the midst of the storm. And that's just some of what I've been thinking about the past week. And John Eldredge's book, again, Resilient, it has helped me begin to think a little bit about that. The subtitle to his book is Restoring Your Weary Soul in These Turbulent Times. And it's really, again, I'm only a few chapters into it, but if the rest of it continues the way that it's begun, it's really worth taking some time and reading it.